Okay, folks, I'm a little bit late, but this is Kate Johnson at The Art of Cheese with Friday Fromage from the farm. And I had a lot of technical problems getting here, so sorry I'm a little bit late. But it is Friday Fromage from the farm. This is election week. Do you all have a little election fatigue? I know I do. But I decided, this has been a really important week. So I wanted to somehow tie the election in with this Friday Fromage from the farm. But I wanted to give it a positive spin because frankly, we've had enough negative spin this week, right? So we're going to talk about red, white, and blue cheese. Patriotism via cheese. So that's my subject today. I really made this up about 15 minutes ago, so we'll see how I do. Anyway, if you're new to me, I'm Kate Johnson with The Art of Cheese in Longmont, Colorado, on Briargate Farm. So it's a dairy goat farm, and I'm a cheese making instructor, and that's why this is Friday Fromage from the farm. So before I launch into the cheese part of this, I just want to talk a little bit about just sort of, I guess, the notion of patriotism. I mean, we've just come through a historic election. And yes, there has been a lot of negativity. And, no matter what side you're on, where you are in the political spectrum, where you are in the country, this has been a big week. And it's been a hard week for a lot of people. Again, regardless of which side of the political spectrum you're on, it's been a challenging week. And it's not over yet. But, there's been some really good things that have come out of this election too. And we are very quick to point out all the negative things that have come out of this election. But if nothing else, if we take nothing else away from this election that's good, let's talk about voter turnout, because good grief, it was phenomenal, which is why this week has been so frustrating, right? We're still waiting for results because there were so many people that voted that we're still counting votes. But I do think it shows that we're paying attention. I don't think you can say Americans are complacent anymore. We're paying attention, and that's a good thing. So with that, that's all I'm going to talk about politics, but I'm going to segue into red, white, and blue cheese. And I want to talk a little bit about what might make a cheese red, what might make a cheese white, and what might make a cheese blue. Sometimes it's things you want there, and sometimes not so much. Sometimes it's a function of what cheese it is and how you're handling it, how you've flavored it, or what milk you've used. So I just thought, well, let's try to make something out of this patriotic week that has something to do with cheese. And let me tell you, cheese has been my great escape. Really not just during the election season, but during this whole pandemic thing. This has been a rough year. I mean, I think we can all agree. 2020 has just sucked, right? It's been an awful year. But in my life, I have goats and I have cheese, and I can really get lost in those two things. And I think I've helped a lot of other people really get lost in those things. And honestly, it's hard to stay super bummed when you're hanging out with goats or you're eating or making cheese. So I've looked at this as a very good, healthy distraction. Now, granted, I've probably drank a little bit more wine than I should with my cheese this year, given that it's been kind of a sucky year, but I've had an awful lot of fun making a lot of cheeses. So again, if you've just joined me, I'm tying in patriotism to cheese in a very indirect, very sloppy way. We're talking about red, white, and blue cheese. So I'm going to start by I want to show you my little cheese board. I put this together literally 5 minutes ago. So you see I've got my red here. I had to put a real red because all my spices were really orange, that I was trying to get a red look. So here's a couple examples of maybe red cheeses. Here's a couple of examples of very white cheeses. And of course we have an infamous blue cheese. So I thought I would talk a little bit about each of these categories and what might make a cheese red, what might be good, bad, and white and blue as well. All right, so let's start by talking about red. So red is not usually a color we associate with cheese itself. And in fact, I would say most of the time when your cheese is red, it's probably not a good thing. Because red in a cheese, especially on the rind, can indicate some kind of a bacterial infection or contamination. And usually I cut those red things out. So in that case, red might not be so good. Now there might be some times though where I've encouraged something red to grow. For instance, Brevibacterium linens, bee linens in a washed rind cheese. Now most of the bee linens I work with tend to be more orange, but there are strains of bee linens that get much more of a reddish color. And in that case, you put it there. It's okay if it's turning red. You wanted it to. But in more cases than not, I would say the most common red color in cheese is via wax, right? So this is a little piece of smoked Gouda, and it was waxed in red. This color of red is not a natural color in cheese most of the time, but it's very pretty on a cheese board to have that bright red wax. Now, why might we want to use red wax? Well, besides the color, sometimes red wax indicates something about that cheese. In the case of Gouda, red wax indicates that it's a young Gouda versus black wax, which would indicate it's a very aged Gouda. So there are sometimes reasons why we've chosen red. I myself usually choose it just because I want some variety. So I use basically 5 colors of wax. I use clear, and that's when I want to be able to see the cheese through the wax. So something like I've made my beautiful tricolor cheddar and I want to see it through the wax. So I'm going to use clear. There's also, of course, red. Black is very common. There's an orange wax that's kind of pretty because it sort of looks like cheese. And then there is, what did I miss? Purple. I love purple wax. It is completely non-traditional in the cheese making world. Happens to be my favorite color, so I love purple wax. But beyond that, there are other colors. There's green waxes. I don't know if I can think of any others right off the bat besides those. But some of them have a tradition, like I said, with the Gouda, and some of them are just like, what do you like? And you want some variety on your cheese board. Now, another way we could get red into our cheese is what I did here. This was a little log of Chev, and I rolled it in spicy Mrs. Dash spice blend. So it has a lot of red pepper in it. You could also use smoked paprika. You could also make a little disc of cheese, and you could cover it with raspberry jam. That would make it red. Or sun-dried tomatoes. Or you could put cranberries in your cheese, like Wensleydale often has cranberries. So these are reds, obviously, we put in there, but they aren't really the cheese itself. All right, well, those are just some fun things that would get red. Now, let's go to white next. So let me turn this around here, and we'll see some white cheeses. So on the left here, this is a little wheel of feta. And on the right here is actually the rind is not white because this is a little Munster, which is and this variety I made is very brie-like, but it does have a washed rind. But you can see the inside is very white. Now, white cheeses, I was also going to show you, I didn't get it out. White cheddar, for instance, right? White cheddar. So there might be different reasons why a cheese is white. So in the case of white cheddar, there is nothing special about white cheddar. It is just cheddar, but it's cheddar where we didn't add a colorant. So most of us think of cheddar as being orange, right? And that's because we've added a natto to it and became orange. White cheddar is just that same cheddar with the absence of a natto. Now, that might be one reason we might have a white cheese. A big reason why your cheese might be very white compared to, say, a creamy yellow might have to do with the species of milk you're using. In my case, as you know, I have goats, and goat milk is very white compared to good quality cow milk. Now, I know y'all are thinking, hey, most of that cow milk at the grocery store is very white. I would say that's not really the best quality cow milk. Cows that are free-ranging on pasture with a very wide variety of things in their diet, besides just grain and hay, are typically going to have a much more golden color to their milk. Whereas goats eating that same exact diet are going to have very white milk. Why is that? Well, it has to do with the way the animal metabolizes beta-carotene in its diverse diet. And cows cannot fully metabolize the beta-carotene. And beta-carotene is what makes carrots orange. And so that cow milk retains some of that golden hue. whereas goats can fully or more fully metabolize that beta carotene, and they take all that color out of the milk and make it very pure white. Also, you might know, if you knew this from high school chemistry, that beta carotene, it can be converted to vitamin A. And so the goats have done that work for you, and so the goat milk is very high in vitamin A. Whereas the cows, it's a little lower in vitamin A. They haven't fully metabolized the beta carotene for you. So those are some reasons you might have white cheeses. And so for instance, if you were to make a camembert is typically made with cow milk. The inside of that camembert should be very golden and gooey and buttery. But if it's very white on the inside, that tells you it's probably a goat milk camembert, or it's a low quality cow milk camembert. Also, speaking of camembert, that white might be growing on the rind, right? Because that's the hallmark of a white, fluffy, bloomy rind cheese like brie or camembert, is that it has that very white kind of fuzzy rind. And that comes from the ingredient Penicillium candidum, which we've added, and it grows on the outer edge. All right, so we've covered red and white. I'm sure there's lots of other reasons we might have white cheese, but that was some of the things I thought of. And then, of course, there are the blues. So let's look at this little one. So this is, of course, a blue cheese. Now, by looking at this cheese, and you see the very golden color here, you might guess that this is a blue cow's milk cheese. It is. I made this exact same recipe with goat milk, and it was very white with the blue. I wish I'd had that to show you, but sadly, I ate it all, so it's gone. I am going to make it again, though. So blue in a blue cheese is mold. It is mold, and we put it there. We wanted it to be there. In fact, we put it there, and then we did some things to encourage it to grow. It's not necessarily just any old blue mold. Most of the time, we are using a mold called Penicillium roqueforti, and this mold originated in the cheese caves in Roquefort, France. And it was very damp and wet in there, and this blue mold grew. And a lot of times it was growing. In fact, the legend goes that it was growing on a piece of rye bread that some cheesemaker left sitting out, and it got moldy. And then some of that cheese traveled to the interior of the rind of the wheel of cheese that was sitting out, because that wheel didn't have a fully closed rind. So when we make blue cheeses today, a lot of times what we're doing is we're adding this Penicillium roqueforti, whether you've grown it yourself, people do that using bread, or whether you've bought a freeze-dried Penicillium roqueforti, or you might harvest some blue from another blue cheese. I've done that before, where you just scrape out some of the blue mold from your favorite blue cheese, you put it in some warm milk, you add that to your cheese making recipe. But that blue mold is only going to grow where it gets air. And so typically we think of blue cheeses as having these blue veins on the interior. But the only way most of those are going to get those blue veins is if we pierce the wheel so that air can get to the center of the wheel. Now, in the case of the blue Stilton, which I'll show you once again, this is a little different type of recipe. And in fact, I did pierce this once or twice. And you can see where I pierced it, where there's these straight lines. But you'll also notice kind of a marbling effect of the blue. And that has to do with how this cheese is made. Because when we make blue Stilton, we don't actually press it. We put those curds in there. They're very soft and maybe not super formed yet, and we don't press them. We just let the weight of the cheese over a long period of time, several days in the press, compress it. We don't press it because we don't want to eke out all that air. We want to allow air some inside the wheel of the cheese so that the blue mold can develop both on the inside and the outside. I think a lot of people don't realize that most blue cheeses get pretty blue on the outside too, but we typically kind of clean off the outside either with a salt solution or just scrape it off at the end so that the outside doesn't look totally blue and fuzzy, which during the aging process it does. So blue mold in a blue cheese that you intentionally made blue cheese is desirable. Now, in a lot of other cheeses though, blue molds might still be desirable and they might not. It just sort of depends on what you're going for. So, there are some ways that you can treat your cheeses as they're aging that will encourage blue growth or discourage blue growth. And for instance, recently I made some camemberts. Now that typically does not have blue in the rind, it's just white. And that's because we've put this Penicillium candidum in the milk or on the wash, and then we salt the outer edge profusely so that it encourages the growth of the white stuff, but it kind of discourages the blue stuff. But I will say that I made some camembert using kefir. Now, kefir is not the same as culture, but it is a culture. And there's a whole nother subject we could do, our whole nother talk we could do about kefir. But when you make a camembert with kefir, you have to do some things to encourage the right things to grow and discourage the blue. Well, I forgot to do that part. I just let it go, and pretty soon I had all these little blue speckles mixed in with my white. And that wasn't really what I was going for, but accidentally I had made cambozola. Anybody hear of cambozola? Gorgonzola, camembert cross, right? And so sometimes, even though that was an accident, and I ate some of it, but the rest of it I kind of threw away because I didn't really want cambozola, and I'd also let the rind go a little too much, but tasted very good. It was quite delicious. So blue cheese is probably one of those happy accidents that sometimes you want and sometimes you don't, but it is never really a terrible disaster. In fact, I'm in a little cheese group where we've all been making the same cheese, and some of them got a little bit blue, and we just renamed those cheeses something with blue in it and pierce them, and okay, let it go in that direction, it's going to get blue. Also, if you are doing a natural rind cheese, often what that is you're allowing the natural blues and molds and browns and yeasts and whatnot to grow on the rind. And the blues tend to come out first. And so it does get a little blue. And then eventually it settles down and it might get a little bit more brownish or grayish. Now, there are some other things we might add to a cheese to make it blue that aren't mold, right? Like blueberries, right? Or something along those lines. So there are ways, in fact, there is a Stilton, it's a white Stilton that does not have blue mold powder in it, but it does have blueberries in it. I mean, there's a white Stilton that has no blueberries, but I did buy a version of white Stilton that had blueberries in it. So this is another way we could get blue into our cheese. All right, so that was my patriotic Friday Fromage from the farm, talking about red, white, and blue cheeses. If you just tuned in and you missed it, it'll be posted on Facebook here in just a minute. And then I'll be going over to my Instagram channel, The Art of Cheese Longmont, and I'll be doing this all again. So if you missed my feeble effort at tying in patriotism to cheese this week, you can come watch me over there. At any rate, I hope everybody found this a nice little distraction from all of the news out there this week. And I hope you all are taking some time to take a break from all of the news out there. Calm yourself, eat some cheese, have some wine. You do know that cheese triggers the same pleasure parts of your brain that cocaine does, but cheese is a lot better for you than cocaine. So have some cheese, have some wine, you'll feel more relaxed, you'll get through it, we will survive this. And then let's just remember that patriotism comes in all shapes and sizes, all different looks, and let's all just try to remember that even when we disagree, I think everybody believes that they want the best for the country. And if we could all just try to get on the same page a little teeny bit, maybe if we all just made cheese together, we could heal some of the divide. Anyhow, enough politicizing and ruminating about patriotism. That's all for this week. Again, I'm going over to Instagram now, and I'll be doing a little bit more of this discussion. And then I hope you all will visit us at a cheese-making class. In fact, this weekend, there are no cheese-making classes. I'm doing a soap-making class, which is a little departure, but that's kind of fun. But next week, we resume. We're doing a cotija and queso fresco class on Thursday. We're doing, Oh, what comes Saturday? I think more BA, and we're doing a bunch of other new classes. So go to theartofcheese.com, look us up, and you'll see we're doing lots of virtual classes. Believe me, it is a wonderful distraction from all the chaos out there. Cheese is very calming. So I will see you again soon, and take care of yourself and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.